two legends, one stage, zero peace. Hollywood has seen drama, but nothing like this. Bette Davis and Joan Crawford weren't just actresses, they were icons, powerhouses, and rivals locked in a decades-long war that blurred the line between screen and reality. Behind the Oscars and red carpets hid a storm of jealousy, ambition, and icy disdain. Their feud wasn't petty, it was personal. Roles were stolen, insults flew, and grudges outlived them both. What fueled this fiery battle? Let's dive into Hollywood's most infamous rivalry, Bette versus Joan. Who were Bette Davis and Joan Crawford? Before they became enemies, they were already icons. Bette Davis was known for her intense eyes, sharp tongue, and fearless acting. She wasn't interested in looking pretty on screen. She wanted to act, to challenge, to be remembered, and she was. Davis was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, winning 2. Joan Crawford, on the other hand, was pure Hollywood glamour. With striking features, polished style, and a relentless drive, she rose from poverty to become one of the biggest stars of her time. She won 1 Oscar and had a reputation for controlling her image down to the last detail. Both women were hard-working, incredibly talented, and ferociously ambitious. But Hollywood didn't have room for 2 queens. The real beginning, love and jealousy. The feud between Davis and Crawford didn't begin on a film set. It started in the heart. In 1933, Bette Davis starred in a film called Dangerous. During production, she fell in love with her co-star Frank Chatone. He was charming, handsome, and just as ambitious as she was, but Joan Crawford had her eye on him too. While Davis admired Tony's talent and hoped for a relationship, Crawford went straight for the win. She invited Tone to her lavish home, greeted him naked in the pool, and soon after, married him. Davis was heartbroken and furious. Years later, she still couldn't hide her bitterness, saying he was madly in love with her. He was a fool. She took him from me. Crawford, of course, denied the love triangle, but the damage was done. Bette Davis never forgave her. Competing for the same roles. Throughout the 1930s and 1940s, Davis and Crawford were often compared, and both women were fighting for the same type of roles, strong, dramatic female leads. Bette Davis built her career at Warner Brothers, earning praise for bold roles in Jezebel and Dark Victory. Meanwhile, Joan Crawford was at MGM, starring in hits like Grand Hotel and The Women. But as they aged, Hollywood became cruel. Leading roles for older women were rare, and suddenly both Davis and Crawford found themselves competing again for survival. This only made the rivalry worse. Public insults. Bette Davis never held back. She spoke her mind, especially when it came to Joan Crawford. She once said, "Joan Crawford slept with every male star at MGM, except Lassie." Another time she sneered, "She has gleaming black eyes like a viper." Crawford, though quieter in interviews, fought back in her own way. She was calculated and clever, often undermining Davis in subtle but powerful ways. When Davis was nominated for an Oscar for Whatever Happened to Baby Jane in 1963, Crawford made a stunning move. She offered to accept the award on behalf of any nominee who couldn't attend. Davis didn't win, and Bancroft did, and as the cameras rolled, Crawford walked on stage and accepted the Oscar, stealing the spotlight from her rival on her biggest night. It wasn't just petty, it was warfare. The explosion. Whatever happened to Baby Jane? In 1962, Hollywood finally had a brilliant idea. Put Bette Davis and Joan Crawford in the same movie. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane was a psychological horror about 2 aging sisters, one a former child star, the other a washed-up actress. The tension in the script was nothing compared to the real-life tension on set. Bette Davis played Baby Jane, a grotesque, bitter woman who tortured her sister Blanche, played by Joan Crawford. Behind the scenes, the torture was real. Davis reportedly had a special Coke machine installed on set. Knowing Crawford was a Pepsi board member, during one scene, Davis had to drag Crawford across the floor. She accidentally injured Crawford's head and needed stitches. Later, Crawford got her revenge. During a scene where Davis had to carry her, she wore a weighted belt to make it nearly impossible. The hatred oozed from every scene, but the film was a hit. Audiences loved it, critics raved, and Davis even got another Oscar nomination. Crawford didn't, and that just poured more fuel on the fire. Backstage sabotage. The Oscars after Baby Jane weren't just dramatic on screen. Joan Crawford campaigned behind the scenes against Bette Davis's nomination. She contacted other nominees, offering to accept their awards on their behalf. When Anne Bancroft won, Crawford didn't just accept the award. She made sure to pose for every camera, shining with victory, while Davis stood fuming in the wings. Davis later said, "I'll never get over that," and she didn't. The sequel that never happened. After the success of Baby Jane, producers wanted a sequel. Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte. Both Davis and Crawford were cast, but things quickly fell apart. Crawford complained about the script, the production, and even faked illness. She was eventually replaced by Olivia de Havilland, a close friend of Bette Davis. Davis made sure Crawford never returned to the set. Joan Crawford was humiliated. Hollywood had taken Bette's side this time. Two very different personalities. The feud wasn't just about love triangles or Oscar snubs, it ran deeper. Bette Davis was bold, brash, and unapologetically competitive. She didn't care about looks, she cared about raw talent and fearless performances. Joan Crawford was her opposite, polished, poised, and obsessed with beauty, image, and staying in control. Davis saw Crawford as a plastic Hollywood product, more style than substance. Crawford saw Davis as bitter, jealous, and threatened by her glamour. But in truth, they were reflections of each other. Two ambitious women trying to survive in an industry that chewed up women and spat them out once they aged. They didn't hate each other just because of personal slights. They hated what the other represented. Davis resented the game Crawford played. Crawford resented how Davis refused to play it, and both were punished for daring to stand out in a man's world. Their battle wasn't just personal, it was symbolic. They were fighting not just each other, but the entire system, and they knew it. They clawed for every script, every paycheck, and every scrap of respect. And in the end, Hollywood didn't celebrate their strength, it pitted them against each other for its own amusement. The final years. As time passed, the spotlight dimmed and their legendary feud slipped from the headlines, but not from their hearts. The bitterness lingered, etched into Hollywood history. In 1977, Joan Crawford died of a heart attack. When asked for a comment, Bette Davis delivered one of the coldest lines in showbiz history. "You should never say bad things about the dead, only good. Joan Crawford is dead. Good." It was brutal, sharp, pure Bette. She didn't flinch, she didn't forgive. Davis outlived Crawford by 12 years, still acting, still unfiltered in interviews. Even in her final years, she never softened, not about her greatest rival. Their feud may have ended with death, but the fire never truly died. It became legend, two icons locked in eternal combat beneath Hollywood's glittering lights. Was it all just hype? Over time, some have questioned, was this feud real or was it good for business? After all, Baby Jane wouldn't have been such a success without their rivalry. Studios certainly benefited from the drama, but those who worked closely with both women say the hatred was very real. Director Robert Aldrich once said, "It wasn't just a rivalry, they really detested each other." And their letters, interviews, and behind-the-scenes stories support that. Still, the feud did something incredible. It made both stars unforgettable. Hollywood's harsh reality for women. Behind the glamour and gossip, a darker truth simmered. Old Hollywood wasn't just tough, it was cruel, especially to aging actresses. Bette Davis and Joan Crawford weren't just icons, they were warriors in a war they didn't choose. They rose to the top in a world that worshipped youth, then got punished the moment they dared to age. They were told they were too intense, too demanding, too much, but what they really were was powerful. Hollywood sold the lie that beauty fades and women fade with it. They were cast aside when their looks changed, mocked for their age, and denied the roles they had earned. And when they fought back, the industry didn't applaud. It labeled them catty, hysterical, or washed up. The so-called feud between Davis and Crawford, that was Hollywood's favorite story. Two fierce women clawing at each other. It made for great headlines. But what if that story was never real? What if it was engineered by studios, by publicists, by an industry afraid of women who couldn't be controlled? They weren't enemies. They were victims of a system built to break women down, then pit them against each other. In truth, they were mirrors, both scarred by the same machine. And in surviving it, they proved something Hollywood couldn't handle. Aging doesn't steal power, it reveals it. Their legacy today. Today, Bette Davis and Joan Crawford are more than movie stars, they're icons. Their work is studied in film schools. Their performances are praised by critics and adored by fans. But their bitter feud didn't die with them. In 2017, it was revived in the TV series Feud, Bette and Joan, starring Susan Sarandon and Jessica Lange. The show pulled back the curtain, showing the raw, painful reality behind the glamour. It revealed how both women, despite their differences, were victims of a ruthless, male-dominated Hollywood that thrived on competition and conflict. The series didn't just rehash the gossip, it humanized them. Bette Davis, with her sharp tongue and steely eyes, made it okay for women to be fierce, flawed, and unapologetically ambitious on screen. Joan Crawford, polished and relentless, proved that elegance, resilience, and sheer determination could take a girl from poverty to power. Their rivalry may have fueled headlines, but their legacy shaped generations of women in film. In the end, their greatest fight wasn't with each other, but with the system that tried to silence them, and somehow they both won. In conclusion, the story of Bette Davis versus Joan Crawford is not just about two women who couldn't get along. It's about fame, power, aging, sexism, and survival. They were enemies, yes, but they were also two of the greatest actresses in film history. Their feud might have been filled with cruelty, but it was also unforgettable. And maybe, just maybe, they understood each other more than anyone else ever could. Feuds are never about just one thing, they're about everything. And this one, it was about everything Hollywood didn't want to talk about, until two women forced it into the spotlight. Thanks for watching. If you want more real stories from old Hollywood and beyond, be sure to follow along. Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear what classic star feud you want covered next.